This is the Harry Morgan Show with your host, Dr. Harry Morgan. The Harry Morgan Show brings you Christianity in focus.
What are the characteristics of Christianity? What are the characteristics? Because, a lot of societies have had Christian witness, Christian presence, Christian institution, Christian history. Often it begins with missionaries, often traders, travelers, whatever, and churches start. If we say that we are Christian, can we say that there are certain things that are characteristics that when you see these characteristics, you will say that, oh, yes, that shows me that this is Christian, right? It's like anything natural or even man-made. They have characteristics. If you see a tree, if you are not blind, you know it is a tree, right? But I'm making the point even on a much more elementary level. That is to say,
because you are talking about characteristics of a particular
type, of a particular thing. So here I am, and say I've come from outer space. I don't know anything, and I say, Christian, what is that? Give me the characteristic, right? And what are you going to give me? The person goes to church. Okay. The person says they are a follower of Jesus. Okay. The person says that they have had a conversion experience. Or the person says they were born into a Christian family. Now you are hesitated when I say born into a Christian family, right? Or the person says, oh, my tribe is Christian. Okay. Or, oh, I just like what Jesus is about. Okay. My uncle is a Christian. My family is Christian. Okay. All of these things go back to this question of what the census picks out. Because when the census people went around to document this population, they asked certain questions. I was trying to find out what the questions are because I've seen some of them before, but I've forgotten the details.
If I may help you.
Okay.
Being a Ghanaian.
Yes, you were asked some of those. Exactly. So you know the questions they asked you.
The question they will ask you
is
your name.
Your name.
Your father's name. Mother's name. Siblings.
Yes.
How many people are living in this house?
Yes.
Religion.
Yes.
So religion.
What do you say?
Because I identify with Christianity, I would say Christian.
What other question did they ask you about religion?
Any other question? So they just pick it on the surface.
Okay. So here is the thing.
Yes.
If you were doing a religious survey, not the one that the census people
This one is population, national population, and
yes,
census.
yes, it is. But they wanted to also find certain other demographics.
Yeah, but they didn't go into the religious aspect.
And that is what I'm
specifically religious survey.
That is what I'm coming to. Okay. If you were doing a specific religious survey, what would you do? You would actually ask people. The first question about religion is the easiest one, but it's the most uninteresting one, right? You are going to ask them, do you go to church? You might ask them, how many times a week do you go? Do you go every Sunday? Okay, because what you are trying to actually look at is religious behavior. Okay. In addition to what people say they believe, you will ask questions about beliefs. You can ask those questions. Then you also ask questions about religious behavior. How many times they're going to church? If you are, very particular, you even ask them, do they give money to support the work of the church? You might even ask questions about what they do for other people, right? You might even ask them, well, do you support somebody else because of your Christian conviction? You might even ask them, and this will sound a bit controversial, do you go and visit people in the hospital? Do you go and visit people in the prisons? Okay. Do you participate in ministry that cares about widows? Okay. Now, at that point, you are getting into certain minutiae to actually see the culture of Christianity that they have.
Does this not sound more like somebody can do all these things, just like in the Bible, the nature of the Pharisee, and then Jesus Christ? So let's say Jesus standing for Christianity, the Pharisees standing for all these characteristics and attributes that you are giving.
No,
Somebody can be all these.
well, but I want to push back on that. And here's what I mean. I think that the Pharisees are somewhat misunderstood, especially in popular preaching, because for a lot of the Jews of Jesus' day, they respected the Pharisees. And some of the Pharisees were considered quite noble. Okay. Jesus' problem with the Pharisees is very complicated. And of course, Paul was a Pharisee who became a follower of Jesus. There are a lot of things that they are contesting. Now, sometimes you see Jesus play off the Pharisees against the Sadducees. Okay. So I don't want to present the Pharisees as like the bad boys. Hold on.
Focus is on
Their practices.
Their practice.
Yes. But you see, even with the Pharisees, when Jesus criticizes them, as far as I can tell, he says you should listen to them.
Yes. Because they were teachers of the law.
Okay. But he says that there are certain things that they are doing that you should not imitate. That distinction is not trivial, because in some ways the Pharisees were also helping people to live out what it means to follow Yahweh. Okay. So it is not a total condemnation of the Pharisees. Now, here something else that Jesus. Now I'm sounding like a theologian than the ordinary historian that I said I was. Right. But you see, sometimes what Jesus will say is, "You have heard it said." Right? When he says you have heard it said, I'm sure it's not just about what the Pharisees have said.
Not really.
Okay. So he's also talking about how the society as a whole thinks. You have heard it said. Sometimes you even be specific. According to the Gospels, you say, well, it is said about Moses. Okay. And so he's making a certain reference.
It's making reference to the scriptures.
To the scriptures. But what has now been the understanding of people in the first century about what the scriptures are supposed to teach? You see, so when he says, you have heard it said, well, this is what you're saying now. But let me tell you, a proper understanding will be X, Y, Z. And then Jesus will go on and say something.
So just opposing that to the canon.
So in our culture today, there are important questions to be asked as to what type of Christianity or what types of Christianity we are expressing. Okay. So part of our challenge is we have something in Ghana called Christianity, or we have different types of Christianities in Ghana. And part of our challenge is to be able to sift through and find out, well, which ones are really worthy of the name, quote unquote, Christian.
That would sound controversial.
Well,
because if you put it in this bracket, types of Christianity.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah.
And somebody will also go the way of types of religion.
Yes.
So are you making a categorical statement about types of Christianity or types of religion?
Well,
if types of Christianity, what do you mean by the types of Christianity?
Okay. Should I speak as a theologian? Should I speak as a...
You are working on theological stories. You are talking about Joseph, a historian, and Paul, a theologian.
Okay, here's the thing. At some point, we have to be willing to ask very critical questions of the kind of Christian practices the kind of Christian preaching, the kind of Christian teaching, and the kind of Christian embodiment we see in the society.
I don't want to get confused.
This is what I mean.
I want, for the purpose of
your audience, right?
Yes. Type of Christianity, kind of Christianity. They sound two different things.
Okay, here is the thing. Let me say that somebody shows up and says, well, I am a prophet, and Jesus has called me to proclaim Christianity to you. Okay. My word is final. What I say Christianity is what Christianity is.
To that person.
No. I'm impersonating somebody saying
I
that.
understand.
Okay.
I'm just pointing to the person you are referring to.
So the question is, why should anybody believe him? Okay. Now, on what basis does anybody challenge him that no, you don't even represent Christianity? There has to be a basis for something. Okay. So when I say types of Christianity, okay, that is what I'm alluding to. There are people in this country on the air today who have been on the air for a while, preaching all kinds of things. Okay. If there is no way of evaluating what they say, and if there is no standard for evaluating what they say, then we are in trouble. Because then it means anybody can stand up and make any claim about anything. And as long as they are making claims and they have a television network or a radio station where they are propagating this stuff, we have to accept it as such. I have asked this question of some friends of mine 30 years ago. I asked them. That's a long time ago. That is why the 1970 threshold is important. Okay, because these things have been happening over a period of time. There are a lot of big, quote unquote, ministries in Ghana today. And if you trace their history, they all came out late 70s. Okay. So the question is, how do you go about evaluating any claim that somebody makes that they are a prophet or a Christian?
On the types of Christianity. Yes.
Whatever they are claiming.
I get you, because I want you to finish with that one.
Okay.
To come and talk about the kind of.
Okay. And that has a lot to do with history. Okay. And I'm a historian. I do a lot of historical study. And what I always say to people, ground rule number one, everything in this world has a history.
Ground rule number one. Note it down.
Everything in this world has a history. And if anybody tells you that history doesn't matter, then that person is afraid of the truth.
If anybody tells you that history doesn't matter, that person is afraid of the truth.
So whoever shows up, my first question is, where did you come from?
This is a big question. We will talk about it in specifics.
Yes, in very
where did
you
that
person come from?
Because people surface from anywhere. They just pop up and it's just like, hey, I am a messenger. I'm going to take over the nation, and I am the Messiah.
Yeah.
To the extent that some people are claiming.
Yeah.
We don't know their history.
Yes.
But they are claiming that in the next 500 years, their faces are going to be the one.
I'm going to run away from that for now.
I have that duty. I owe the nation a duty to bring that clarity, because this point is very, very, very essential.
Okay, and the thing is, this issue about history begins personally for every individual. Everybody has a history. We can't talk about you without your parents. We can't talk about your parents without where they came from. Okay, and Saint Anselm, medieval Christian, he has a very interesting line.
There should be a trace.
There should be a trace
To where your history started
Yes, and Anselm has this line.
Source of your history.
So Anselm has this very interesting line, and he says something like this: "You cannot have lived before your time."
Interesting.
Yeah, you cannot have lived before your time because you are the specific product of those two individuals who gave birth to you. And until they were in existence, your very existence was unthinkable. Your history happened at a particular time and place. Okay. So whenever somebody shows up, look, we do this in our normal interactions with people. If you meet somebody for the first time, what do you do?
At least you want to ask for the person's name.
You ask them. The first time I met Sunday, we did that. You know, Sunday, where are you from? You know, from Nigeria. You go. It's a normal.
Maybe it's because you are a historian.
No.
You might have undertaken that for academic.
No, not for academic purposes.
But that is a natural.
Yeah, even when people go to the club, right, and they meet somebody for the first time, they ask, "Who brought you here? Where are you from? You know, what neighborhood?" History is wired into us as human beings.
But do you know that many people have not paid attention to history?
But you do it.
You are explaining.
No, but you do it all the time. Look, if you go to town today,
my history teacher didn't make me like history, but you are making me fall in love with history.
You should fall in love with history. Yes. I was trained as an engineer. I wasn't supposed to be a historian, so I'm an accidental historian. But here's the thing: accidental historian. I don't think I'm perfect in any way. There's so much I don't know that I'm spending time constantly learning. But here's the thing: when a person steps out the door, right, and they come back home, and you ask them, "Well, what happened?" What did they do? They tell you a story.
Yes.
I went here today. I interacted with this person. I came home. This happened. We are always telling stories. We are always narrating things. We are always speaking historically. You are all because the life you have lived today disappears into the past. Everything you have to go and retrieve. So as human beings, living historically is our primary mode of being.
That is true, because even talking as a journalist, news becomes history.
It's happening all the time.
News becomes history.
You know, so the historical question is not trivial. When the person shows up and he says that God has sent me, I have to ask you, well, where are you coming from? Who spoke to you? How did you know that God has sent you? Mind you, God has already given us the scriptures. Almost everything in the scriptures are historical.
But you see, what they do is different from what the scripture is like. They're really opposite.
Okay. That is why it is important for us to recover this historical consciousness as Christians, or just as people in general. If you are not doing any history, if the people in the church are not teaching you any history, mind you, we have Christians walking around and they don't know any history about the life of Christians. They don't seem to care.